I do meditative practices. I think in the beginning it was curiosity. I was very curious. And that really was the kind of propulsive energy, the spark that moved me into doing for a long time. And still that shows up for me. I'm curious. What's interesting too, though, is there's a point, and maybe it's earlier on, maybe it's later on in your practices, where they meet you. So I think in the beginning, you have a formal practice, you sit down, you meditate, or you walk and meditate, or you sing and you meditate, whatever your practice is. And I think often we're drawn in by the resultant experiences. Do you know what happens? What do we feel or experience, or what are the benefits? And that's really good. Do you know, that keeps us coming back too. And then I think there's a point where the practice starts to, one of my teachers would say, do you, but where the energy from the practices finds you. So you'll be moving through life, and let's say a moment of joy happens, and it will become almost like a more pure joy as you're just in the pure experiencing of it. Or a moment of sadness will happen, and the being in that, I don't like the word purity, but there's something about that in my experience, the practice will meet you there too. And sometimes I think that's the greatest surprise is, you're upset or irritated or annoyed or grieving or lost, and the energy rises to meet you, or the energy descends to meet you. And I was talking to a teacher and friend about, kind of the felt difference between surrendering and willingness. And to me, surrendering, like, somatically feels like almost a falling back, like a step back, and feels very passive. And really the language I like is willingness. And to me, there's something relational about the word willingness. And so some of you know I was really exploring, what does it mean to heal on a cellular level? Or what does it feel like to be with one single cell? Like, what's going on in one cell? And what enlivened from that was, I'd feel into the one cell, and that was cool. Really attend to it. And then the question that arose from there was, now, what's it like to feel this with every cell in my body? And in that way, this willingness to really deeply be with our experience, there's a movement forward. There's a reaching forward into life. God. There's a meeting life. And maybe that's why it feels woven to me, this interplay. Like the Thich Nhat Hanh that I love so much, the yes and thank you. It is really, like this uprising of life. You are this uprising of life in this human experience. And for me, not a passive surrendering into, like not a release into becoming a puppet, or to be just not merely. Okay, so my sister's friend, who has since sadly passed away, a dear family friend, we talk about going with the flow, and he'd kind of say in response, like, well, dead fish go with the flow. Like, extreme passivity maybe isn't the answer in going with the flow. And so how is it that there's this beautiful interplay, this being life in motion, this being this energetic movement, and meeting the various manifestations of this same energy in life. And, for me, I think it comes from the heart typically, but it's almost as if I can feel the energy or awareness or my attention reaching out in a yes. And, it's simultaneously these individual moments, these individual beings, these individual movements of life, and at the same time, in that yes, in that almost offering ourselves into life, into the yes, it's like there's this enmeshment, there's this woven action, there's this dynamic play. It's really, really interesting, the breaking apart and coming together. Which to me, you can feel that. You can feel that pulse of life, that pulse of energy, that like drawing together and coming apart and it's like life breathing in energy, in spark, in the yeses, in the interwoven connection of life. And feeling that right now in my own body. It's both like the prayer and the response, the call and the answer, this sense of that movement, that pulse, that I don't know, the hum, throb, as impermanence. As the manifestation itself of impermanence, or as the smallest part I can feel of impermanence, this and within that too, you feel into that, within that too, is deep stillness. So inseparable. I think once you see it or once you feel it, they just call each other out. And every moment of life, every movement of life is that opportunity, is the opportunity for an arising of something that just by its being calls the wholeness forward. And I think that's what, and this is not, new to me, but it's like, I think there are moments where I feel more or less deeply into it. The ways that life is calling us back home, or in every moment there is this opportunity to awaken. And maybe it's the most simple part is because it's always already here. But I think too that, for me anyway, the living of life, is a pointer into the wholeness. And it's funny, I can hear the big recycling trucks are going by my house, and I can hear that, and I can hear the birds singing, and I'm under the willow, and she keeps reaching out to comfort me and connect with me. And the wind, I didn't forget you. It's such a dance. And so, as these transitions are arising for me, and changes, and, excitement about some things, and, frustration about others, or heartache about things, it's interesting to watch my preferences. It's interesting to feel into the willingness, and it's interesting to see the spontaneous arising of, I'll just call it something larger, something greater that meets me. And I want to say, there's a part of me that wants to say it holds me in my humanity, or it holds me in the difficulty. And I think that that's true. But it's not just that. Because it's so inherently me. Like it's experiencing it all too. And I'm using it because I don't have a better word. But the Michelle-ness and the life that is living as Michelle, both experiencing it, life, and they both arise to be in relationship with it. And then, for me, always nature, always getting close to the earth and seeing, what wisdom she has. And again, to the practices, knowing that I've done the practices long enough that some of it's automatic, the sitting on the earth and letting her receive, the heavy parts of me or the sad parts of me, because she's the big mama and she's here to hook it up. And then figuring out ways to reciprocate that love. But I think I'm just going to sit out here, and I see some little turtles out in the water here, and feel into that. The big levels of expansion and contraction, and then that deep energetic pulse. And rest in the unfolding, unknowing of what this adventure is. And to the extent of my ability, meet it all with at least some flavor of willingness. And maybe gratitude too on some days or in some moments. The body, the voice, the vehicle, the building, the studio. They can all change, but there are things that remain. Deeply grateful for these practices.